Prostitution has been a part of our society for centuries, but the women who engage in it are often overlooked. Whilst there are many reasons women go into the sex industry, the majority are forced into it by poverty, seeing it as a last resort to earn money. At the moment in Britain, prostitution itself is not illegal, but there are a number of offences linked to it. For example, it is an offence to control a prostitute for gain or to keep a brothel. But many prostitutes are arrested by police whilst working, and even more find it impossible to report being raped, beaten or abused on the job.
Women are having to make a choice between working on their own, but risking safety, or possibly facing arrest by working with other people but increasing safety, and we don't think anyone should have to make that decision.
The victims of the sex trade, the women in prostitution, who almost inevitably come from backgrounds of deprivation, abuse, racism and marginalisation, are the ones paying the price for basically the problem that men have created.
Working out how to solve this issue is difficult. Much of the debate centres around whether prostitution should be something we eradicate from society entirely.
So what people tend to say is you'll never ever eliminate prostitution. First of all, the sex trade is driven by men's demand. Women do not wake up one day and think, what shall I do? Shall I be a researcher? Shall I be a journalist? Or shall I go into prostitution? Poverty's been around for a long time. Child sexual abuse has been around for a long time. So has racism, but we don't say we'll never end that. But the solution would be, first of all, to imagine a world without prostitution. And of course, if you saw an end to patriarchy, to the inequality between women and men, to the normalisation of sexual violence towards women, then prostitution would not survive.
Some people want to criminalise the sex industry to try and stop it, but it's been criminalised for many, many years and it hasn't stopped, and it's really driven by women's need for money and women's poverty. And so if you want to stop it, which we are ready to help with, we're ready, that's what we want. On my badge we say outlaw poverty, not prostitution. We're very happy with that, but that's the direction it has to go in, not a big crackdown and criminalisation of the industry.
The English Collective of Prostitutes believes the first step should be protecting the women and want to see sex work decriminalised. This would allow prostitutes to work without the threat of prosecution, but pimps would still be outlawed.
Currently, the laws are very unfair and very unjust, so women are criminalised, for example, for working on the street together, are arrested, convicted, given a fine. Obviously, where do you go to pay the fine? Straight back on the street again.
But what about those who pay for sex?
We decriminalise the selling of sex, but we look at where the problem lies. We look at who is creating the demand and keeping the sex trade going. And that's those men who pay for sex. We criminalise them. Just the threat of criminalisation is often enough of a deterrent. And those that say, but what about the women who therefore won't have any income, who won't have any other way of making money? As I've said, we don't say that to men. We don't give them the option. But also, as a very good friend of mine, a sex trade survivor, Rachel Moran, once said to an extremely privileged man who was saying, but you can't criminalise the demand, you can't criminalise the men, because it will take away the income of those women who have no other option. What we say is, if a woman is hungry, you put food in her mouth, not your cock.
We don't want clients criminalised. It doesn't stop prostitution. It doesn't reduce prostitution. All it does is makes it much harder for sex workers to work safely. And we know this because it's been implemented in a number of countries, and including Ireland, Northern Ireland, France, Sweden, and various other places. And in each of the countries, violence has increased after the law has been implemented. And the reason is that sex workers can't implement basic safety measures because clients are criminalised, so you're just rushing and you have to just get in the car without checking the client out, without your friend being able to write down the number plate, all those kinds of things.
Durham University made headlines recently by announcing support for students who work in the sex industry. A student union officer defended their decision, saying it was an attempt to support students in a difficulty arising from the reality of rising costs in higher education.
There are very few working class students at Durham University, and yet it's the most impoverished of women, often the most disadvantaged of women, that end up in prostitution. So they're normalising a system, a trade, built on inequality that they will very, very rarely end up having to justify their daughters being in.
Just because you are helping sex workers doesn't mean you're promoting prostitution or promoting trying to get women into the industry. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You're just sort of responding to something that's there.
At the heart of this issue is women's safety and how best we can achieve this.
All the sex workers that we know, we speak to hundreds of women, want the laws off their backs, want the police to respect them, treat them properly, not have the right to arrest them, not have the right to turn up, visit whenever they like, gather information, and they want the police to do their job. When something does go wrong, women want to be able to report it and for something to actually be done about it.